Today, we're zeroing in on one of the most vital, life-saving roles you'll find on any worksite, the fire watch. Now, this is about way more than just standing around with a fire extinguisher. We're talking about being a dedicated guardian against a potential catastrophe. So let's get right into it.
You know, it always starts right here, with something that looks pretty harmless, right? A shower of sparks from welding or cutting. But here's the thing. Each one of those little sparks is basically a tiny glowing ember just looking for a place to land. And they can fly, I mean really fly, over 35 feet, finding fuel in the most unexpected places.
And look, this isn't just some made-up scenario. This is from a real incident report. It is a perfect and pretty terrifying reminder of what happens when that danger is underestimated. You get a few sparks, they find something combustible that nobody saw, and before you know it, you've got a massive fire on your hands. This is exactly why a fire watch isn't a nice-to-have. It's an absolute necessity.
Okay, so let's really break down that danger. Because to get why the fire watch is so important, you have to fully appreciate the problem. You have to respect the incredible destructive power of one tiny spark.
So, what are we worried about? Well, yeah, the obvious stuff, of course. But honestly, the biggest threat is often lurking where you can't even see it. We're talking about flammable vapors just hanging in the air, or dust that's settled deep inside a structural void, or insulation packed behind a wall. That's the stuff that turns a small, fizzling spark into a full-blown inferno.
So how do you possibly fight a threat that's hidden, that's unpredictable? Well, you fight it with a person, a dedicated, trained professional. You counter it with the guardian on watch.
And here it is, the official definition. But I want you to focus on two words here: sole responsibility. That is the whole ballgame. A fire watch does one thing and one thing only. They watch for fire. They're not there to lend a hand. They're not there to grab tools. They're not on cleanup duty. Their entire job is to be the first and best line of defense.
You know, a fire watch's job doesn't actually start when the sparks begin to fly. Nope, it begins way before that, with a really careful look at the entire work area. It's called the pre-work scan.
Now, according to OSHA, these conditions right here are completely non-negotiable. If you've got flammable materials inside that 35-foot zone, or if a spark could slip through a crack in the wall into another room, you have to have a fire watch. It's not a suggestion, it's the law.
Let's just take a second and burn this number into our brains. 35 feet. That is the minimum safe zone that has to be cleared of anything that could burn. You might be surprised how big of an area that actually is, and it's the fire watch's job to make sure it's clear before any work starts. And the key word here, the most important word, is verify. The fire watch is the final checkpoint. They walk the area, they check everything, and you know what? They have the authority and the responsibility to stop the job cold if things aren't right. They are literally the gatekeeper of safety.
All right, so the area is secure. Now, the fire watch needs to be ready for action. And that means having the right tools for the job and maybe even more importantly, knowing exactly how to use them.
The main tool of the trade is, of course, the fire extinguisher, but just having one sitting there isn't going to cut it. The fire watch has to be trained to use it on what's called an incipient-stage fire. That's just a fancy way of saying a small fire that's just getting started. The whole idea is to stop it before it has a chance to grow.
And that training really comes down to this simple little acronym: PASS. It's a 4-step process that's designed to be super easy to remember when the pressure is on. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. Knowing this like the back of your hand can be the difference between a small oops and a massive emergency.
But what if the fire is already too big? A smart fire watch knows when not to be a hero. Their next critical skill is knowing exactly how to sound the alarm and call for help. The extinguisher is for the small stuff. The alarm is for everything else.
All right, let's talk about what might be the most overlooked, and because of that, the most dangerous part of a fire watch's job. It's what happens after the hot work is finished.
It's a really common way to think, isn't it? The welder packs up, everything gets quiet, the sparks are gone, so the job's over and the danger's past. But is that really true?
No way. Absolutely not. Remember that hidden insulation we talked about earlier? Well, a spark can land in a pile of sawdust or behind a wall and just sit there, smoldering for minutes, maybe even longer, with no visible flame. And then, long after everyone's clocked out, boom, it erupts.
And that is why this second number is just as important as the first one: 30 minutes. A fire watch must stay on duty, watching that area for a minimum of half an hour after the work is complete. This is the critical window to catch one of those sneaky, smoldering fires before it gets out of control.
Okay, let's wrap this up by making it crystal clear who is responsible for what. Because workplace safety is everyone's goal, but it only works when people have specific, clearly defined duties.
So you can kind of think of it as two sides of the same coin. The employer's job is to set up the system for success, provide the training, the gear, the rules. The Firewatch's job is to execute that system with total, unwavering focus. They have to stay alert, keep their extinguisher handy, and be ready to hit that alarm in a split second.
And let's end with what is, without a doubt, the single most important rule of being a firewatch, and this comes straight from the regulations. No other duties. That means their eyes aren't on their phone, they're not helping with another task, they're not doing anything except watching the work area. Their undivided attention is the most powerful safety tool on the entire site.
So I want you to remember this. A stray spark, well, that might just be an accident, an unavoidable part of the job. But a fire is almost always a failure. A failure in preparation, a failure in procedure, or a failure of focus. So the next time you see hot work happening, just ask yourself that simple question: who's watching the work? The answer to that question could literally save lives.